In this video, we're putting together everything we've learned so far about functions and equations. So we're going to look at a word problem. It says, Miss Bradford's dog Maggie loves rawhide bones. She eats 3 bones each week. Write a function rule to show the number of bones eaten as a function of the number of weeks. Identify the variables used. What does f of 6 represent? First of all, there's a lot going on in this problem. So let's look at the parts of it. The first two sentences, just give us information about the problem. Then we have 3 steps that we have to do to solve this problem. First, it's asking us to write a function rule. Second, we have to identify the variables used. And third, we have to figure out what f of 6 represents. Let's look at the second step first. Before we can even write a function rule, we have to figure out what the variables we're going to use represent. So remember, with the function rule, instead of looking at x and y, we're looking at x and f of x. So x is our independent variable, f of x, which is in place of our y, is our dependent variable. So if you look at the sentence with the directions for the function rule, it gives you a hint as to what your variables should be. That we're looking at the number of bones eaten and the number of weeks. So we have our 2 things, we just have to figure out which goes with which. Well, the number of weeks is something that we can't control, okay? That I'm basing how many number of bones she eats off of the number of weeks. So weeks, the number of weeks, is going to be x, and the number of bones she eats will be f of x. Now we're moving on to writing the function rule, since we've already defined our variables. So there are different ways that you can do this. If you can go straight from this information to writing the function rule, then go ahead and do that by all means. Some people may need to do a chart in order to figure out how to get the function rule, that what's going on. So we're going to make a t-chart. So I have x on the left, f of x on the right, and then I'm going to start with the variables 1, 2, and 3. Then I'm going to skip to 10, because by starting with some lower ones and then skipping, it kind of lets us see what pattern is coming on. And then at the bottom, I just have the x, so that's where I'm going to write the little note to myself of what am I doing in this situation. So let's start filling in our chart. For after 1 week, she will have eaten 3 bones. 2 weeks will be 6, and 3 weeks will be 9. Now moving on to 10 weeks, we want to look back up and see what we've done so far. So with 1 week, it was just the 3. To get to the 2 weeks though, 2 weeks had gone by, so she ate 3 bones each of those 2 weeks, which would be 3 times 2, which would give us the 6. For 3 weeks, that would be the 3 bones each week times our 3 weeks to give us the 9. So for 10 weeks, I want to take the 10 and multiply it by 3 to get 30. So looking at our t-chart and the points that we figured out, we know that we need to take the number of weeks, which in this problem is represented by x, and multiply it by the number 3 in order to find out the number of bones she's eaten. So under f of x by x, I'll write 3x because I'm taking that x and multiplying it by 3. So now I just need to transfer that to the function form. So f of x will equal 3x. Now we still have one part of our equation of our problem that we need to do. It was asking for what f of 6 represents. Well, they put 6 in place of the x. And remember, our x stood for the number of weeks. So by replacing x with 6, they're telling us it has been 6 weeks. So f of 6 represents the number of bones Maggie has eaten after 6 weeks. Now let's look at a similar type problem. I want you to try this one on your own and then press play and we'll work it out together. So each rawhide bone costs $2.50. Write a function rule to represent how much money Miss Bradford is spending on her spoiled dog as a function of the number of bones purchased. Identify the variables used and explain what f of 0 represents. Just a note, I'm doing this at home and Maggie is sitting by me because she keeps hearing me say her name and bone. Once again, we have the three parts to the question. We have to write the function rule, we need to identify our variables, and figure out what f of 0 represents. So first we're going to start with identifying the variables once again. That again we're using x and f of x. So going back up to my function rule is telling me that my function rule needs to represent how much money I'm spending and the number of bones purchased. Well, in this case, the number of bones purchased is what controls how much money I spend. So the number of bones is going to be x, and the amount I'm spending will be f of x. Again, if you can go straight from here to making your equation, then that's great. If you need to make a t-chart, then go ahead and make one with maybe 1, 2, and 3, and then skip ahead a little. Try 10, and then see if you can figure out the pattern. So here's my completed function table, or my t-chart. So with one bone, it just costs $2.50. With 2 bones, I'm spending $5. For 3 bones, it's $7.50. Jumping up to $10, I'm spending $25 on bones. So looking at these, and remember, we want to be looking across. What do we do to 1 to get to $2.50? What do I do to 2 to get $5? What am I doing to 10 to get to 25? Well, I'm taking that number of bones and multiplying it by $2.50, since that's how much each one costs. So to figure out my f of x is going to be taking x and multiplying it by $2.50. So here is my function rule. F of x equals $2.50. Now, I still have one final part to do in my problem. I need to figure out what does f of 0 represent. In this case, x represented the number of bones purchased, and f of x was the amount spent. So they replaced x, the number of bones purchased, with 0, so I'm purchasing 0 bones, so f of 0 would tell me how much I spend on 0 bones, which in this case would be 0, and a very sad dog.